Hello friend, and welcome back to my channel. I have a question for you. Have you ever surprised yourself with how calm you were in a situation that at another season in your life, it would have completely frazzled you? I mean, I don't know about you, but life has been lifing. Even today, before doing this video, as a homeowner, there are certain inspections that you should do just to make sure that systems are going well and things are good with the home, overall maintenance. And y'all, I don't know why I've allowed those things to just freak me out in certain seasons, always expecting to hear really bad news or what is it gonna cost me this time? But I am so in a space now where I don't know everything. I don't have all the answers, but somehow I am able to walk in God's peace. Why? Because I tell him all the time, God, it's just me and you, and if you don't fix it, it won't be fixed. But I trust that you have it all under control. And I have to tell y'all, that is growth and that is God. And it trickles into, I think, the ways that I try to approach life as I do life with God. And I think we all face moments that should rattle us. But when we have that connection and when prayer becomes our rhythm, peace becomes our reflex to whatever life is dishing out. God wants us to know that prayer does not change our circumstances, but it does change us. It turns what should be moments of panic into peace and pressure into purpose. I want you to hang in here with me. We're continuing in the book of Acts this week, but it is a great lesson. So grab everything that you normally use to study, your Bibles, your journals, your pens, your handy dandy notebooks. It's time for us to get into this lesson. Hello to every one of you. Hello, TSSG family. Hello, TSSG family. You're in the TSSG space. Well, hello, TSSG family.
Changing the way you see Sunday school with that Sunday school girl.
Well, hello TSSG family, and welcome to the Team COGIC lesson review for Sunday, November the 2nd. My name is Waynell. You're in the TSSG space, and here I share Christian content that is largely inspired by and or based on our Sunday school lessons. I do serve the Team COGIC family and the international family, and I am excited to share space with you as we review the lesson entitled Prayer Works. Prayer Works. If this is your first time here, where have you been? What's taking you so long to get here? So glad that you're here. I want to say welcome to you. You have just joined an amazing community of people. God has allowed me to share digital ministry in this space for more than 10 years. And I am so glad that you're here, whether you are a pastor, superintendent, a teacher, student, a Sunday school secretary, my favorites, or maybe one of my friends who I'm still trying to convince to get back into Sunday school, but you love a good Bible study. I just want you to know that you found your tribe. So do me a favor, please, everyone, make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. Take the extra step of clicking the notifications bell. Select all, because I never want you to miss any of the content when it is uploaded on this channel. And now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's talk about the ground rules around here, because we are a tribe. We are a community. And around here, you don't show up for what you just get. We're going to be more than consumers. We are contributors in this space. So the first thing that you do to contribute is to take a moment and click that thumbs up like button. I've done my part by delivering this content to you at no charge. The least, this is not even like an offering in church. No, I don't have a certain amount. I just need you to click that thumbs up like button. It is a blessing to me, but it also lets YouTube know the kind of content that you enjoy, and it curates your personal experience. The other thing that I'm going to ask you to do is to get your fingers ready, because you will hear times in the video where I invite you to type something in the chat or to respond to a question that I may be sorting through, and I want you to be a part of our community participating in this space. As we prepare to go into the lesson, I got a couple of church announcements for you. The Brunch and Learn in Jackson, Mississippi was absolutely fantastic. There are 3 remaining. So if you are in the Cleveland, Ohio area, November 15th, I will see you there. If you are in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, November 22nd, I will see you there. And the last one will be on Saturday, December the 6th in Shreveport, Louisiana, all parts surrounding. I want to see my friends, East Texas, Louisiana, wherever you are. I'd love to see you in Shreveport. So check out the website or the link down below for how you can gain access to grabbing one of those seats. And listen, I have got to say, y'all know what this week is. This is the week of the Holy Convocation in Memphis, Tennessee. So prayers for everyone who is either already gone or maybe preparing to head out to Memphis, Tennessee. By the time you all see this lesson video, I will already, if the Lord allows, be in the city of Memphis. So many amazing things going on at the Holy Convocation. If you are there, please plan to be a part of the training taking place with the International Sunday School Department. You can get all the specific information on those events by going to the Facebook page for ISSD COGIC or by getting connected for the emails that come out through those communications. But I would love to see you there. And if you are in the hallway, wherever you are, y'all know how I like to do it at conventions. If you see me, grab me, say something, just say hello, let's take a selfie. But more than anything, travel safely and let's have an incredible experience in our last Holy Convocation in Memphis, Tennessee. Please keep our leaders in prayer. Keep Bishop Sheard, Mother Lewis, our General Board in your prayers as they all serve this week. Let's prepare to go into this lesson entitled Prayer Works. If you want the TSSG notes for this lesson, they've been uploaded on the site for like 2 weeks. So you can always check out the site. You don't have to wait on the videos to get lesson notes. Bookmark the site, if you will. ThatSundaySchoolGirl.com. Bookmark the site, and you can always get content there a little bit earlier than it's up on the video. So you'll find the TSSG notes, the 20 questions. The 20 questions are curated for this lesson. They expand your conversation of the lesson. They also are amazing for teachers. I've done the hard work for you. Just take them into your class and get your class talking. Lastly, if you teach young people, there is a kid pack for this lesson. And even if you don't use it in class, it's an amazing outreach tool to send the young people home to engage with the Word of God throughout the week. The last thing I will let you know is that this lesson series, over time, we do have lesson repeats. So this entire year is largely the series that we had in 2015, the very year that I started my channel. So I've also created a playlist of the lessons for this entire year. I've already dropped in all the 2015 versions and 2015, 2016 versions because they run into next summer. So a couple of things. Number one, you can have some bonus content early, but I would love for you. Thank you all for those of you who have gone back and looked at those videos and you left messages that said, I'm watching in 2025. It's been interesting to see your thoughts. And then I ask you to critique me. How different am I 10 years later in what I deliver in this space? And y'all already know I can't go back and listen. I can't watch. I just can't. I don't know. I don't watch myself like that. Let's get into this lesson. Father, we love you today. And we thank you for this opportunity to be in community, for the opportunity to study your word. Thank you that we're being discipled and we're being made better. We're being given the tools that it takes to live successfully as your people, as your disciples. And so, God, I pray that you will open our hearts, our understanding as we engage with this conversation about prayer. Thank you for the gift of prayer and the access of prayer. Thank you for ears to hear and a heart to move on behalf of your people. I pray that you'll bless every person who is present and those who will study with me over the course of the week. We love you today and we give you glory. In Jesus' name, amen. We're going to Acts chapter 12. We'll be reading verses 1 through 11. The Bible truth, the fervent prayer of the church in Acts and the works of an angel provided Peter's deliverance. Our memory verse is going to be verse 5. So we've been in Acts for several weeks, and we know that Acts keeps moving. It is a fast-moving book. It is full of power, and we've also seen how the gospel has moved from Jerusalem to Judea, Samaria, places in the outermost parts of the world, and the pace of the movement of the gospel has not slowed down. We're looking at early believers who are learning that following Jesus means having courage under pressure. And it means having faith that just will not flinch, because it's not an easy time, but they are such committed people. And so by the time we get to chapter 12, Persecution we're going to see has reached a boiling point, and we're going to see what that looks like. But the church turns to its greatest weapon, which is prayer. Go ahead and warm your fingers up. Our first comment in the chat is going to be, our greatest weapon is prayer. Our greatest weapon is prayer. And so what happens in the story reminds us that, God's plans cannot be locked down. His power is going to continue to move through praying people. I have 4 words that I want you to prepare to write down. They will guide our study of this lesson. As you're preparing for those 4 words, I want you to know that even in the most impossible moments, God reminds us that prayer is never powerless, right? It's the very place where his promises and his purpose break through our pressure and turns our fear into freedom, moments that free us. So here are your 4 words: pressure, prayer, power, praise. Pressure, prayer, power, praise. And in the face of pressure, prayer becomes the pathway to the power that God wants to give us. His deliverance is still surprising us, right? Not because he's unpredictable, but because his ways always exceed our expectations. So again, prayer doesn't exist just to change our situation. It changes us because it restores our confidence in the God who still answers. Let's move on to our cast of characters. You know how we do it. First character we have is King Agrippa I. He's the king who wanted to please the people, another people-pleasing king, by persecuting the church. And he had James executed and Peter arrested, and he's hoping to make a public example of him. So we'll take a look at that. And in our text, he's going to represent pride and pressure and political power that attempt to silence the work of God. There is Peter, y'all know we love Peter. We love Peter, that bold apostle, that disciple turned apostle, if you will, who once denied Jesus, but now he stands 10 toes down, firm in his faith. And even in prison, chained between 2 guards, he's not taking down. He's solid in what he believes. And he really shows us that peace, that is real peace that trusts God. You only have peace like that when you really trust God. There is the church. Those are ordinary people who don't have power. They don't have influence, but they do have prayer. They may not have every resource, but they've got the most important. And they remind us that God moves through praying people, even when they can't see a way out, how it's going to happen. God moves through praying people. There's the angel of the Lord, who is God's messenger, who shows up suddenly and brings light into a dark cell, breaking chains and leading Peter out. There's Rhoda, the young servant girl. Y'all know I love a good woman in the text who recognizes Peter's voice, and she's going to get excited. And then there are other believers at Mary's house. Lots of women in the text this week. Mary, resourceful woman with a home where the people are praying, a praying community that is gathered, and they are interceding for Peter. We'll see them as well in the miracle that they experience. So as we move into chapter 12, again, Acts has been full of movement and momentum as the gospel is spreading. So after Stephen's death in chapter 7, persecution breaks out in Jerusalem, scatters believers into Judea, Samaria. Why can I not say Judea today? In Judea and Samaria. That happened in chapter 8. And what looked like a setback, we've been studying this for several weeks, but what looked like a setback was actually a setup, right? Because everywhere the believers went, they carried the message of Jesus Christ. And then in chapter 9, we saw Saul, the fierce persecutor, who meets the risen Christ on the Damascus road. He becomes Paul, one of the greatest witnesses for the gospel. We've also studied about Peter. His ministry continued. We talked about moving beyond those Jewish boundaries. In Acts 10, we studied about Cornelius, the Roman centurion, showing that the message was not just for one group of people, it is for everyone. And we talked about that moment changing everything because it was no longer isolated to those of Jewish identity. So by the time we get to chapter 11, The church in Antioch is really thriving, and these Gentile believers are being added daily to the church. But the growth is the problem. That's the tension in this week's passage. The Jewish leaders and the political authorities are feeling threatened. We've seen that for several weeks. And they feel threatened by a movement that at this point, no matter what they have done, the movement is unstoppable. The movement is unstoppable. So Herod Agrippa steps onto the scene and uses his power, again, to please the people by turning up the heat on the church. And so that sort of is where we enter our story. We've got believers who are praying, Peter in prison, chained between two guards, and Herod who is planning this public spectacle. So this really, think about this as a really tense moment, right? Political pressure, public approval, spiritual warfare, like all of this sort of colliding at one time. Let's look at verses 1-4. Now about that time, Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church, and he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Yep, I had a King Jamesy word in verse 4, but let's get into it as we're looking at the pressure that is in this text, because this passage opens with pressure rising from every direction, because the early church again has grown in this influence. And here is this leader, Herod Agrippa, who is the grandson of Herod the Great. He is determined to gain favor with the Jewish leaders. How is he going to gain this favor? By attacking the voices of the people who are spreading the gospel, namely those who are most visible. So it's around AD 44, and Jerusalem is really tense. There's a lot of political maneuvering going on, and Agrippa is ruling under Rome's authority, but he depends on Jewish approval to maintain his position. So it feels really uncertain for him. He's in a fragile position. So, nothing buys popularity faster than persecuting followers of Jesus. So that's exactly what he does here. The text tells us that Herod stretches forth his hands to vex certain of the church. And what that phrase is telling us, first of all, this is deliberate. It is a deliberate and hostile attack. He's not just reacting in anger. He is reaching out with a high level of intention. The word vex here means a sense of harassing or injuring or causing harm through continual pressure. So it's more than just like physical persecution. This is psychological warfare, right? Herod is sending a message that no one is untouchable. So he starts with James, the brother of John, one of the sons of thunder, called the sons of thunder. He is the first apostolic martyr in this particular situation, actually recorded in scripture. And by the sword, he is killed or executed. So that most likely means that he was beheaded. It was a punishment that was reserved for political offenders. So that's not a small detail here, because that signals that Christianity is now labeled as a political threat, right? This is not just a religious thing. Now, this is a political situation. So the movement that started in like prayer meetings is now shaking palaces. It is a big deal. And, when Herod sees how much it pleases the Jewish elites, well, then he's like, well, let me keep going. Then he chooses to arrest Peter. And Peter is like the most public of the faces of the apostles at this point. So we are also given the timing that it is during the days of unleavened bread. And I hope you underline that in your markup document. That is not a small detail. This is a festival that follows the Passover. So it is the festival that commemorates Israel's deliverance from Egypt. So the people are celebrating their freedom while God's messenger, Peter, is chained up. And so what Herod is intending to do is stage the execution of Peter after the feast. So he's ensuring that there is, maximum attention, on the tradition, doesn't want to shake or rock the boat right now. He's trying to avoid any offense during the time of the festival. And then Peter is placed under 4 quaternions. That's the word I kind of bumbled over. You did too. Of soldiers. That's 16 guards in rotation, 4 at a time. 4 at a time. They're watching him 4 at a time. 2 of them are chained to him, and 2 of them stand watch at the door. Y'all, that's a lot. 4 to 1. That's a lot of men. That's a high level of security, which really shows us just how fearful Herod was of another escape story, right? There had been other miracles, right, involving apostles slipping out of prisons. Go back to chapter 5, verses 17 through 25. And so when we think very practically, Herod knows that there's something supernatural that happens with these people. So he is trying to do everything that he can to make sure that Peter does not escape. We also see the word here, kept. Kept here is in I think we're in verse 4, where I was looking at the meaning of the word kept here. They are guarding this man closely. They are maintaining strict custody of Peter. I just want you to pay attention to the level of confinement and control that's taking place here. Again, Herod wants to make sure that nothing interrupts his plan. But what I think is really powerful here is, like, in this moment, like, the fact that Herod thinks that he has the power, but God, who has all power, is the one who's actually allowed this moment. Like, that pressure is a part of the plan. And we don't always think about the value because we don't like the pressure, but pressure is a part of the plan. And the church is going to soon see what it looks like when the delivery takes place. It's going to see how the plan of Herod is actually defeated in all this. So what looks like it is for Peter's defeat is actually the setup for deliverance. And I thought about that even in, like, the scope of the things that we go through, the things that seem like they are meant for our demise, the things that are going to take us out are actually the things that God is going to use to set up our deliverance. So I think so far we see that, opposition doesn't mean that God is not present, right? Again, when we think about it, setting the stage for his next act to demonstrate his power, we should know that God is always present. So before we even reach the conversation of prayer or power in this story, we've got to sit with this idea that there is this pressure that the saints, that they are feeling, that Peter is feeling. A couple of key learnings. Pressure can become a classroom for faith. It doesn't have to be a reason that we quit, though. It doesn't have to be a reason that we quit. I think spiritual opposition is often hiding behind political or social motives, and understanding that helps us to keep focus on what is God doing, what is his mission, and I think that minimizes the space for personal offense. So again, pressure doesn't mean defeat. It just means that the stage is set for God's next work. So go ahead and put this in the chat. Pressure doesn't stop purpose. Pressure doesn't stop purpose. God is often doing his big one, as the young people say. He's doing his big one, and he's working under tight deadlines, but he's doing his big one. So with the pressure at its peak and seems like hope is dwindling, the story is now going to turn toward the response that changes everything, and that is our prayer. The church begins to pray. In verse 5, Peter therefore was kept in prison, but prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for him. Let me read that again, because that's powerful. Peter therefore was kept in prison, but, and I hope you circled the word but in your markup document, because you know that there's something different or powerful on the other side. But prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for him. So while Peter is locked away under this rotation of 4 guards at a time, 16 guards watching him, the scene really moves us now from the prison to the prayer room. And Luke tells us that the people of God are praying. This is such a powerful, moment of contrast in the scripture, because, Peter is in prison, but prayer kept going. So while one man is bound in chains with guards watching him, there's a whole community that is bound together in their faith, right? We see this phrase in the text, they are praying how? Without ceasing. And that carries this idea that it is continual. It is an earnest effort. They are all gas, no brakes. They are not letting up. And it's the same intensity that's used to describe when Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? So this is not like a sweet and polite prayer. It's not that kind that you whisper a few words as you crawl into bed. No, this is a collective. This is deep and it is persistent. So, these believers are out here interceding like their lives are dependent on it, right? Have you prayed for someone like that before? Or do you have someone who will pray for you like their lives depend on it? And the Greek sense behind this word means like it implies being stretched out, like as if they are fully leaning into God. They are refusing to let go, Jacob, until something changes. So their prayer doesn't stop the pressure that's around them. What does their prayer do? It invites God's power into it. And I tell you all the time around here that things change when you bring God into the situation. Things change. You can put that in the chat. Things change when you bring God into your situation. And so I think that this verse also shows us the unity of the early church. Unity. Yep, put unity in the chat. Because these people are not, this is not just like a group of apostles. They are ordinary believers who are meeting at a woman's house. They're at Mary's house. So in a culture where faith is dangerous and, leaders are being executed, they choose to bind together. They get together. So prayer for them is both a spiritual act, but it's also like this really bold statement of their courage. And, the same spirit that filled them in chapter 2 on the day of Pentecost is now the spirit that fuels their sense of endurance for the tough things that they go through. So when we look at how Luke writes, it connects back to that earlier imprisonment that I mentioned in chapter 5, where God released the apostles at night. But here the emphasis is not on the action that an angel is going to take. The emphasis here is on the difference that the prayer of the church makes. Before the miracle even happens, Luke is showing us strength here, not in numbers, strength that's not in money. This is not about influence. It is the power of prayer. It is the visible driving force in this story that is making the difference. So again, this tension between Peter being kept in prison and prayer being made without ceasing shows us sometimes that, faith often lives like in the middle of things that feel like a contradiction. That feels like such a contradiction. Peter's kept in prison. That's why I told you that word but is important, because something is happening in the middle of what feels like contradiction, and life is like that sometimes. So, this situation looks like it's sealed. It looks like it's over. Yet the people haven't stopped praying. The people keep seeking. Peter's chains are real, but the confidence of the people is real as well. Right? The confidence that they have in God and God in the heart of the people is real. So when we look at their intercession, it's not wishful thinking. Their intercession is honestly warfare in motion. Let's take a look at some key learnings. But before we do that, I want to look at one other thing. I think that as we look at even this verse, we should notice the rhythm, right? The empire acts. Political forces do their thing, but the church prays. The guards are stationed, but the believers are stationed as well. Stationed in a position that is steadfast in prayer. So you got one side that's trusting in its weapons, but there's another side that's trusting in a different kind of weapon. They're trusting in the weapon of prayer. They're trusting in their worship. And so, I think that this is really a setup. It's the turning point of the story, if you will. Persistent prayer is not about convincing God to act. I've been listening to different, preachers and podcasts talking, and even questions on prayer. Prayer is not about begging God or, getting him to do what he knows he's already going to do anyway. No, it is about aligning our hearts to believe that he will. It's aligning our hearts to believe not only that he will, but prayer often aligns our hearts with his will. So persistent prayer is, again, not about convincing God to act. It's aligning our hearts to believe that he will and aligning our hearts to his will. And when everything around you seems locked down, prayer is the space that no one can close. No one can ever lock you out of prayer. I don't care where you are, what you do. No one can lock you out of prayer. You can pray anywhere. You can pray in your heart. No one can lock you out of prayer. And I think that there is something powerful that we see with corporate prayer. I think corporate prayer builds resilience. We are wonderful in ourselves. I don't mean that we're not wonderful, but we can be strong individually. That's what I'm trying to communicate. But the power that we have when we are together, the synergy that happens in prayer, that shared faith is what keeps the fire burning when sometimes our individual flames are running low, when we run low. All right, so let's move on. The church's greatest strength, it was never like just the people. It was never, system, structure, strategies, buildings. Their greatest strategy was always prayer. It's always been the greatest weapon of the church. So for this unseen place of prayer, this woman's home, the story is going to shift for us again a little bit. And so what begins as pressure that's sustained through prayer is now going to open the door for divine power to step into this space. So I think that prayer is the place where heaven's agenda interrupts human limitation. Yep, you can put that in the chat. Prayer is the place where heaven's agenda interrupts human limitation. Let's look at verses 6 through 10. And when Herod would have brought him forth the same night, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains. There's those 4 soldiers on duty at that time. And the keepers before the door kept the prison. And behold, the angel of the Lord came upon him, and a light shined in the prison. And he smote Peter on the side, and raised him up, saying, Arise up quickly. And his chains fell off from his hands. And the angel said unto him, Gird thyself and bind thy sandals. And so he did. And he said unto him, Cast thy garments about thee, and follow me. And he went out and followed him, and wist not that it was true, which was done by the angel, but thought he saw a vision. And they were past the first and second ward. They came unto the iron gate that leadeth unto the city, which opened them of his own accord. And they went out and passed on through one street, and forthwith the angel departed from him. So night comes and the tension gets higher. Peter is, scheduled for public execution the next day after the festival is over. And yet, I don't know about you. I don't want to know what it's like to be on death row. Peter's on death row. And sometimes they talk about someone getting their last meal or whatever. Peter is on death row, scheduled for execution tomorrow. I don't know how I would be feeling, but when I look at Peter, he is sleeping. I know we get the number of the soldiers, but I clued in on the fact that this man is sleeping. He's got guards around him, true enough, but he's sleeping. Like, that detail is not missed on me because, that kind of feels that's hard to imagine. The scene really seems like it's one of total control and quiet trust. Like, I don't think that Peter resting is about him being in any form of denial. Like, he is just that confident in God. He's the same man who once panicked about a storm, and now here he is in the biggest storm of his life, which is going to cost him his life, and he's sleeping through this one. Like, the peace that he displays here for me is like this direct result of trusting the prayers that he knows are taking place. You can trust prayer is working. He's trusting that the prayer behind the scenes is working. And, this is what I think happens when pressure meets presence. When pressure meets presence, when pressure meets the presence of praying people, that's when that kind of calm can come in. So the situation, again, it looks really final. These guards are literally chained to him. There are two more at the door. And every human system says that all these things have been put in place so that there's no escape. But, y'all saw that? But the angel of the Lord came to him and shines a light in prison. Y'all, light always breaks in when God shows up. Put that in the chat. Light always breaks in when God shows up, and the angel touches him gently, strikes him, to wake him up. And, again, just this kind of divine precision that's happening here. Like, God doesn't send a storm or an earthquake. He sends a messenger with quiet authority, right? And the chains don't need noise to fall. Nope. Chains don't need noise to fall. The only thing the chains needed was God's command. The only thing the chains needed was God's command. And so the angel's instructions here are deliberate. Arise up quickly. Gird thyself, bind on thy sandals, and cast thy garment about thee, and follow me. Every single command of the angel is about movement. It's about readiness. And so, God's deliverance required some participation on the part of Peter. And we've got to know that there are times that our deliverance will require us to follow directions, to be obedient. You don't have to understand what all this is right now or how it's working. You have one job to do. Follow the commands. The Greek word meaning follow reflects this idea of continual motion. You don't have to understand. Keep moving forward. You don't know all the pieces. Keep moving forward. Keep following no matter what. So this isn't like a dream about escaping. It is an invitation to obedience that's happening in real time. So how does Peter respond? Step by step. The same way we should. Step by step. He's still unsure of what's happening, but step by step, he is following instructions. Step by step. He's unsure of what is even happening is even real. And in fact, Luke records that Peter thought he saw a vision. He thought he saw a vision. So this is really showing us the human side of faith. Sometimes we walk in obedience before we fully even understand what God is doing. And as the story goes on, the gates open of their own accord. Like, when you think about that, think about the doors at the store when you go in the grocery store, when you go to one of the other retailers, how there's this automatic motion, right? As if the gates are just like those automated doors, they are cooperating with the will of heaven at that point. So God is reversing everything that had Peter bound. Like the chains fall, the guards are sleeping, the gates swing open, and what Herod thought he had sealed, God unseals. God opens that thing up. So this, I don't know about you, this kind of reminded me of the story in Exodus, right? That night deliverance that happens when they are called to get up quickly. They're told how to move, what to do. They have this angelic escort through the darkness moving toward freedom. So, just and how ironic that God moves in this way. There's nothing that just happens, right? But they're coming out of the very celebration of how God had moved in that way before. So just like Israel left Egypt during the Passover, Peter is walking out of prison during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So the message here, these are not accidental details. The message here is unmistakable, that God still delivers his people from oppression. You can put that in the chat. God still delivers his people. He delivers his people from oppression, even when the oppressors wear a crown. God is still delivering his people. A couple of key learnings. Rest is, I have a friend who released a coloring book. You should look it up on Amazon. Look up Rest as Resistance by Elisa Alexander. If you enjoy adult coloring, you will enjoy her book quite a bit. But rest is not only an act of resistance, but rest is an act of trust. It is peace in pressure that becomes this witness that God is in control, right? I place God's authority over my own fear. That's what rest is. In other words, that's God has got this. I don't got this, But God's got this. And that's what I was talking about in the intro. There are just some things right now. There are some ways that my life is moving and things that are happening. And that's how I pray. God, I don't know how this is about to work out. Here are the pieces that I'm trying to juggle. Here are the things that I understand. Whatever I don't understand, I know that you will fill in the blank. And what I know is this: you got this. Like, I'm praying like that these days. And I know he's got this. What am I going to do? I tell folks, I get my 7 to 8 every night. Because God has got this. If I'm out here missing sleep, it's because I'm out here making TSSG videos. But it is not because I'm out here worrying and putting more gray hair in my head. No, that's not it. And God's deliverance usually meets those who are willing to move when he says get up. Those who are willing to obey. And when obedience feels confusing, you got one job to do. Keep walking. Keep obeying. Why? Because clarity often comes after you get moving. Clarity often comes after motion. So, God's power doesn't need permission from the systems that are trying to hold us. Nope. He simply moves that kind of stuff. He moves through them. He moves that stuff out of the way. So the chains, the guards, the gates, they're no match for God, who is working not only quietly, but God does the job completely. Right? So when God says move, even locked doors start working for you. Put that in the chat. When God says move, even locked doors start working for you. So the moment of deliverance is here. The story is not over. And what happens, I think, next really is going to shift from power to praise. Peter and the believers are going to realize that the prayer truly worked. Verse 11 says, and when Peter was come to himself, he said, now I know of a surety that the Lord has sent the angel and had delivered me out of the hand of Herod and from all the expectation of the people of the Jews. When Peter finally stands up in the open air and the night is like quiet around him, and like his mind like catches up to like the revelation of what has happened when he was come to himself. Like, that phrase is like when the fog finally clears for him, when like faith catches up to what God has already done. It's like this realization: I just experienced a miracle. That was not a dream. Like, this escape was not luck. It was God's hand. And this is like no small victory. Like, God did his big one. So Peter understands that, and he uses his words. Now I know of a surety. So it shows us that he knows now without question that he has seen the hand of God up close and personal. And so notice that he's not drawing attention or emphasis to the angel. Now I know of a surety. That tells us that this is a man who knows without question that he has seen the hand of God up close and personal. So notice that his emphasis is not on the angel, but on the Lord who sent the angel. Peter recognizes that the Lord is his source of freedom. So, what Herod planned, what the people expected, and even what fear may have whispered in his ear, none of that matters now, because it all has collapsed under the weight of the fact that God has intervened. So look at this phrase, delivered me out of the hand. This really should be giving like Old Testament vibes when you think about how God rescued his people from danger. You saw words like that in Psalm 34:7 or Daniel chapter 3, verse 27. So this is not about a personal escape. This is covenant language. It is God who is proving himself faithful to those who trust him. And then there is the mention of the expectation of the Jews. That shows us like, how public this persecution had become, right? Herod's goal was like to make a spectacle out of all this. The execution was supposed to get the applause of the people. He was supposed to get a round of applause. And the people were waiting for this. They're waiting for Peter's death. And they're waiting for this to affirm that power belongs to Herod. But God has flipped the script. God has flipped this plot twist. Plot twist here. Instead of a public defeat, Peter now becomes a public testimony. So I think that this plot twist is kind of central to what we see in the book of Acts, that what begins as a threat seems to always end up in triumph for the church. What looks like closure is always this open door for continuation. So I think Peter's understanding or his realization really kind of mirrors moments in our own lives when we have experienced answered prayers, that sometimes deliverance feels like so unexpected that it takes a moment for us to process a little bit what God has actually done. So, his awareness really grows as he retraces what's happened. He retraces his steps, like the chains that fell, the doors that opened, the guards that were supposed to be, you got one job to do. Watch this man. This is your job. So, every detail really points back to this divine orchestration of all of these pieces. So nothing random is happening here. Nothing that God does is wasted. His timing, his methods, his results are intentional. They are precise. And so Peter moves from the confusion of the moment to this confidence that God did this. He moves from the reaction of being released to the revelation that God has shown up in a way that's big. This verse closes our section on praise, but it also lets us see how, we've moved through this entire thing. We started with power, and we've gotten to this point of praise, and it shows us kind of what happens in between while we're waiting on God to show up, and what it looks like to understand and realize that only God can deliver in the ways that he does. Look at what he did with Peter. And so even Peter's awareness, right, is sort of another build in testimony. What is testimony? When you give witness to what God has done or what he can do. So this moment becomes another seed of testimony for Peter, that what started as pressure, when the people started to pray, bloomed into this amazing moment of praise and public witness that God did this thing. So, I think sometimes reflections after deliverance really strengthen not only that testimony that we have of God, but it fuels the confidence that we have for the next trial. And that's why I tell you very personally now, I don't have all the pieces. I don't know everything going on. I don't know all that God is doing. But what I know, in the words of Pastor Michael McWilliams, is I know God by his pattern. And at this point, his pattern is so consistent that my confidence in him is fueled for whatever comes next. I don't got this, but you got this, God. So whatever comes next, you've got this. And I think when we, again, recognizing God's hand in the past situations, that's why I say, y'all seen that t-shirt on my site? My faith has receipts. Right? When you recognize his hand in the past, it deepens your trust for what is ahead. Y'all, culture expects failure, but God delights in the plot twist. He delights in public reversals that do what? Point back to his glory. It's not all good. It's all God, right? I know there's a singer who sings that song. I could say it's all good, but it's all God. Every rescue is a reminder that God's divine purpose always outruns human plans. So deliverance comes for Peter. There's a praise that erupts when they realize it's him. This story actually continued through verse 17. I hope that you read to the end. But I think that his awakening directly leads to a response. The miracle moves from realizing what happened to the community rejoicing, right? They rejoice because they are celebrating what prayer has made possible. They didn't do this on their own. It was nothing that they had the strategy for, but prayer made it possible. And that's what shifts them into this moment of praise. Every miracle moment, every miracle deserves recognition. Every miracle deserves recognition. So put this in the chat. Don't rush past what God just did. Don't rush past what God just did. I want you to be intentional about acknowledging God, even in what seems like small moments. So that when you learn to recognize those small things, over time, first of all, you realize he's doing this big one. But you also learn to build that faith muscle and to build that trust. So again, I think that this story, keeps showing me that God's power is not limited by pressure. This is not the first time we've had this lesson, but every time I read this passage, I'm reminded that the church didn't have status, they didn't have safety, but they did have prayer. I don't know what you don't have, but I do know that you have prayer. And I know that when you have prayer, I know that it is enough. I know that when you have prayer like Peter, you can stand in the middle of chaos. You can stand in the middle of being surrounded by things that are intended to hold you down and choose to rest anyway. Choose not to be all worked up, and remember that peace is not the absence of pressure. It is proof of God's presence. How do I want to move when life closes in? Number one, I want to face the pressure. And y'all, pressure is real. We've got to acknowledge what's real, but we don't have to surrender to it. I think, again, that's when our trust should be center stage. Next, we got to turn to prayer, just like these people in the church. Keep the prayer line open. Talk to God. When everything else feels like it's shut down, your mouth does not have to be shut. Your prayer space is always open to talk to God, and it doesn't have to be like anyone else prays. You don't have to pray like your grandmother. You don't have to pray like your pastor. Prayer is just your conversation with God. I promise y'all, I talk to God. God, you know what it is. You see what's going on. I talk to him in plain, everyday language. You can talk to God, and then walk in power. Move when God says move. Even when you don't get it, when the way doesn't seem clear, you don't have all the pieces, move anyway. And lastly, pause for the praise. You got to recognize what God has done before you jump into rushing into the next thing. Don't rush past what God just did. This is our lesson for this week. Again, this study keeps reminding me that deliverance doesn't just happen in dramatic moments. It happens in the process, that God is working through every stage, even the ones where we sometimes, don't understand all the pieces. If we just stay before him, stay persistent in our prayer, he is working in process. It is always my prayer that you find value in our time together. I want you to know that God is fully present. He's active when things look impossible. No matter what systems have been set up against you, he's present. I want you to feel that peace doesn't come from the absence of challenging things. Peace doesn't come from perfect circumstances or conditions. It comes when you have confidence that God is in control. And then last, I want you to do something. I want you to keep praying. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. Keep obeying, because God is already working in ways that you cannot see. This is our lesson for this week. Again, I hope to see so many of you this week in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm ready for all the hugs, all the smiles, but also I'm ready for what God is going to do in the midst of his people. I hope that as you come into the city, you come in prayerfully. If you're home, that you'll be prayerful even as you engage online, that we don't take for granted the assembling of the saints as we have done for so many years. But with so much going on in the world, I ask that you would pray for the safety and for the peace of the saints as we gather in a city that is already charged with so much other turmoil. As we go out, there will be ways that you see that you're able to be a blessing to this ministry. I tell you week after week that I am not independently wealthy, but I am abundantly blessed. And I have people like you who get around me and support this ministry and help to touch the world through the gospel. So thank you so much for what you'll share. I love you all so much, and I'll see you in Memphis and in Sunday school. Bye, everybody.